I've always had a soft spot for men. Not just any men, mind you, but the kind who carry themselves with a quiet confidence, who look at you like they see right through you, like they know something you don't. It's a weakness, I know, and I've spent years trying to keep it in check. But weaknesses have a way of creeping up on you, don't they? They wait for the right moment, the right person, to unravel everything you thought you had under control. That's what happened with John. I was 32, single, and living in a cozy 2-story house I'd inherited from my grandmother in a small town called Willow Creek. The house was too big for just me, with its creaky wooden floors, wide windows that let in golden sunlight, and a garden out back that I never had time to tend. So, a year ago, I decided to rent out the upstairs apartment to help with bills. That's when John came into my life. He showed up one rainy afternoon, his dark hair damp and sticking to his forehead, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He was in his late 20s, with sharp green eyes and a smile that felt like it could melt ice. He said he was new in town, a freelance photographer looking for a quiet place to work. Something about him felt safe, but also dangerous, like a storm you know is coming but can't resist watching. I showed him the apartment, and he signed the lease that same day. At first, things were simple. John was a good tenant, paid his rent on time, kept the place tidy, didn't throw loud parties. We'd pass each other in the hallway sometimes, exchange small talk about the weather or the noisy neighbors down the street. He had this way of looking at me, though, that made my stomach flip. His eyes would linger just a second too long, and his smile would curve in a way that made me wonder what he was thinking. I'd brush it off, tell myself I was imagining things. I was his landlord, nothing more. But I couldn't ignore how my heart raced when I heard his footsteps on the stairs or how I'd catch myself glancing out the window to see if his car was in the driveway. My weakness for men like him, charming, mysterious, just out of reach, was stirring, and I didn't know how to stop it. One evening, about 3 months after he moved in, I was in the kitchen baking cookies. It was a habit I'd picked up to fill the quiet nights, and the smell of vanilla and chocolate always calmed me. I heard a knock at my door, light but deliberate. When I opened it, there was John, holding a bottle of red wine. "Thought I'd bring a peace offering," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I've been here a while, and we've barely talked. Mind if I join you?" I hesitated. My rule was clear: keep things professional with tenants. But the way he leaned against the doorframe, casual but confident, made my resolve waver. "Sure," I said, stepping aside. "Just for a bit." We sat at my small kitchen table, the wine bottle between us, and talked. He told me about his photography, how he loved capturing moments that people didn't notice, the way light hit a cracked sidewalk, the shadow of a bird on a wall. I told him about my job at the local library, how I loved books but sometimes felt trapped in the routine of it all. The conversation flowed easily, like we'd known each other for years. The wine didn't hurt, either. By the time he left, I was laughing at his stories and feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was reading too much into it. He was just being friendly, right? But the way his hand had brushed mine when he passed me the wine glass, the way his eyes locked onto mine when he laughed, it felt like more. And that scared me. I'd been burned before by men who knew how to play on my weaknesses, who saw my heart and used it to get what they wanted. I swore I wouldn't let it happen again. But John was different. Or at least, I wanted to believe he was. Over the next few weeks, our interactions grew. He'd stop by to borrow a tool or ask for advice about the town, and I'd find myself looking forward to those moments. I'd catch myself fixing my hair before going out to the mailbox, hoping I'd run into him. It was silly, I knew, but it felt good to feel something again. My life had been so quiet, so predictable, and John was like a spark in the darkness. One morning, everything changed. It was a Saturday, early, the kind of morning where the world feels soft and hazy. I was still in bed, half asleep, when I heard a creak outside my bedroom door. My room was on the first floor, tucked at the back of the house, and the door was usually locked. But I must have forgotten to lock it the night before, because the next thing I knew, the door opened, and there he was, John. He stood in the doorway, wearing a plain white t-shirt and jeans, his hair slightly messy like he'd just woken up. The morning light streamed through the window, catching the green in his eyes, and for a moment, I just stared at him, my heart pounding. "Alice," he said softly, his voice almost a whisper. "I didn't mean to wake you." What are you doing here?" I managed to say, pulling the blanket up to my chest. I was in an old t-shirt and shorts, my hair a mess, and I felt exposed in every way. He took a step closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "I couldn't stop thinking about you," he said. "Last night, when we talked, I felt something. Didn't you?" My mouth went dry. I wanted to tell him to leave, to remind him that this was inappropriate, that I was his landlord. But my body betrayed me. My weakness, that pull toward men like him, was screaming louder than my common sense. I didn't say anything, and that was all the invitation he needed. He crossed the room in 2 steps and sat on the edge of my bed. My heart was racing so fast I thought it might burst. "John," I started, but he reached out, his hand brushing my arm, and the words died in my throat. "I know this is sudden," he said, his voice low and steady. "But I've seen the way you look at me, Alice. I know you feel it too." I wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but he wasn't. He saw right through me, saw the part of me that craved connection, that longed for someone to make me feel alive. And he used it. Before I could think, he leaned in, his lips brushing mine, soft at first, then deeper, hungrier. I should have pushed him away. I should have stopped it. But I didn't. What happened next was a blur of heat and whispers, of hands and skin and moments I both wanted and regretted. When it was over, he lay beside me, his breathing steady, while I stared at the ceiling, my mind a storm of guilt and confusion. What had I done? How had I let this happen? John didn't stay long. He got up, kissed my forehead, and said, "I'll see you later, Alice." Then he was gone, leaving me alone with my thoughts. For the next few days, I avoided him. I stayed in my part of the house, kept my door locked, and buried myself in work at the library. But I couldn't escape the memory of that morning, the way his touch had felt both thrilling and wrong. I was angry at him for crossing that line, at myself for letting him. My weakness had won, and I hated it. When I finally saw him again, it was by accident. I was in the backyard, pulling weeds from the neglected garden, when he appeared at the gate. He looked the same, confident, charming, like nothing had changed. "Alice," he said, his voice soft. "Can we talk?" I stood up, brushing dirt off my hands, my heart racing again. "What's there to talk about?" I asked, trying to sound stronger than I felt. He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. "I know I shouldn't have come into your room like that. I got carried away. But I don't regret it. Do you?" I wanted to scream that yes, I regretted it, that it was a mistake, that he'd taken advantage of me. But the words wouldn't come. Because part of me, the part one was ashamed of, didn't regret it. Part of me wanted it to happen again. "I don't know," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, that same dangerous smile, and I knew I was in trouble. Because John wasn't just my tenant anymore. He was something else, something I couldn't define, and I wasn't sure I could resist him. The weeks that followed were a dance of avoidance and attraction. I'd try to keep my distance, but John had a way of showing up when I least expected it, bringing me coffee in the morning, leaving a note on my door with a bad joke, or catching me in the hallway with that look in his eyes. Each time, I'd feel that pull, that weakness, and I'd hate myself for it. But I also started to learn more about him. He wasn't just a charming drifter. He'd grown up in a small town like Willow Creek, raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. He'd left home at 18, chasing dreams of being a photographer, but life hadn't been kind to him. He'd had his share of heartbreak, bad choices, and regrets. The more he opened up, the more I saw him as a person, not just the man who'd slipped into my room. One night, he invited me to see his photos. He'd set up a small projector in his apartment, and we sat on his couch, watching images of sunsets, city streets, and faces flicker across the wall. His work was beautiful, raw, and full of emotion. I saw the world through his eyes, and it made me feel closer to him, like I was seeing a part of his soul. "You're really good," I said, turning to him. "Why don't you do more with this?" He shrugged, his expression guarded. "It's hard to break through. People want flashy, not real. I'm just trying to find my place. I reached out, touching his hand without thinking. You will, I said. I believe in you. He looked at me, his eyes softening, and for a moment, I thought he might kiss me again. But he didn't. Instead, he squeezed my hand and said, "Thanks, Alice. That means a lot." That night, I went back to my room feeling something new, not just attraction, but connection. It scared me, but it also felt right. Over time, our relationship shifted. It wasn't just about that one morning anymore. We'd spend evenings together, cooking dinner or watching old movies. He'd tell me stories about his travels, and I'd share memories of my grandmother, who taught me to love books and stories. It felt like we were building something, but I was still wary. My weakness had led me here, and I wasn't sure I could trust it or him. One evening, about 6 months after he moved in, everything came to a head. We were sitting on my porch, sharing a bottle of wine, when he turned to me, his expression serious. "Alice," he said, "I need to tell you something." My stomach dropped. I braced myself, expecting him to say he was leaving, or that he'd been seeing someone else, or something worse. "I'm falling for you," he said instead, his voice steady. "I know I messed up that morning. I shouldn't have pushed you like that. But what I feel for you, it's real. I want to be with you, not just as your tenant, but for real." I stared at him, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to run, to protect myself from getting hurt again. But another part, the part that had spent months getting to know him, laughing with him, seeing his heart, wanted to take the risk. "I don't know if I can trust this," I said honestly. "You know how I am with men. I let myself get carried away, and I get hurt. I don't want that again." He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. "I get it. And I'll wait. I'll prove it to you, Alice. I'm not going anywhere." And he didn't. Over the next few months, John showed me who he was. He was patient, kind, and steady. He helped me fix the leaky faucet in the kitchen, brought me flowers from the market, and listened when I talked about my fears. Slowly, I started to trust him. My weakness didn't feel like a weakness anymore, it felt like a strength, because it had led me to him. 1 year after that morning, we were sitting on the porch again, the air warm with summer. John took my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "Alice," he said, "I love you." I looked at him, at the man who'd slipped into my room and my heart, and I smiled. "I love you too." It wasn't perfect. I still had my doubts, my fears, my weaknesses. But with John, I was learning to embrace them, to see them as part of who I was. He wasn't just my tenant anymore. He was my partner, my friend, my love. And together, we were writing a new story, one I hoped would last.